a belief of someone caring for you. If you take the time to ask those questions, it makes a big difference. We find that same thing in relationships. If a guy was dating a young lady, for instance, and you're asking questions about her, what does she do, this, that, it indicates that you have a genuine concern, and that means a lot to people. So I think it's mandatory that a manager takes the time to intentionally ask questions and just spend time with an individual. And I think that's the best way to really get to know them and understand them better.
So Holly, we're going to just start off by biggest question. How can leader foster belonging at work?
That is a very good question. I think that foster belonging by emphasizing, it's a word that we at Lyrians use called social interest, which is basically a genuine concern about others, the welfare of others. That might be the best way or the easiest way to conceptualize it. So as a leader, I believe you'd want to foster social interest because that's a core Adlerian principle. That's basically what the entire theory is kind of based on. We could do that through encouraging cooperation. Adler talked about that all humans are kind of rooted in this connection that we have with one another. So if we believe that leaders can create opportunities for team members to collaborate meaningfully, you would want to create what I would call psychological safety. One of Adler's disciples, if I could call him that, was Rudolf Dreikers. He talked about that in one of his books. Individuals need to be able to feel safe to express themselves without fear of judgment. I think leaders should celebrate diversity and ensure that every voice is heard. And it also helps by recognizing individual contributions, the things that people do. So, you could kind of do this through things like assigning cross-departmental projects where team members collaborate based on their strengths to make sure that each contribution is acknowledged. A person, could tell whether you're paying attention to what they do. And this kind of reinforces mutual respect and also collective achievement with everybody together. You could also do things like have inclusive celebrations. When you have diversity and you have people from many different cultures, I think it helps to have things at the office or at your place of business where you are kind of celebrating the diversity that you have there, the different events. It could be holidays, milestones, those kinds of things help promote inclusivity and, as I mentioned earlier, psychological safety.
I love this conversation, Holly. And one of the company's leaders that I was speaking with, they highlight different team members and they highlight, what their accomplishments were and what they're good at. So everyone is able to receive or being acknowledged for their strength. So we know as leaders, we want to get everyone to feel collaborative and create these environment, understanding the various cultural backgrounds and abilities that are present. How should leaders navigate team differences?
That's going to require fostering understanding and respect. Adlerian theory highlights the uniqueness of each individual's experience. And again, most of the things that I talk about involving this will come from either Adler, my interpretation of Adler, and Dreikers. Dreikers had a book, I believe it was The Courage to be Imperfect, and that's something that we talk about quite a bit. So by promoting empathy, leadership encourage open dialogue to understand each team member's needs and viewpoints. So that requires a lot of conversations to get to know your people. Also, you should value diversity through maybe problem solving when issues come up. Look at what each team member can provide and view it as a strength rather than a challenge. So you want to I think leaders should frame the differences between people not so much as a problem, but as an asset, and then try to facilitate learning from one another. One thing, for instance, I used to coach basketball, and I've coached a lot of different things, but each individual on the team does not have the same skills. But you understand what those skills are, and you get people to work together for the benefit of the entire organization or the team. But you have to first know what those differences are. So then I don't look at a difference of a person being tall. That's a value that a person has, but a short person has a value too, because the short team member on my team can do something different that we need done that the tall guy could not do. So I try to look at all these differences as an asset versus, a liability. Like I think a leader could organize workshops where the employees do role plays to kind of practice showing empathy and understanding and developing strategies that you could use for other collaborative problem solving that you'd be using later on. So, things like that, or cross-cultural training, things that highlight diverse perspectives, which comes through conversation. Having a genuine concern with a person, it allows you to get to know them and view their differences, again, as I said, as strengths, not barriers. So a lot of this, I think, just comes down to, again, as I mentioned, social interest being that piece that means you have a genuine concern about people. So you want to know about them, and then you use those differences as benefits versus liabilities.
Sounds like in this case, the leader is taking a lot of time getting to know the assets of their team members, so they already know the value that they can bring. So perhaps you can talk about some of the ways that we can collaborate or get to know our team members.
It's just spending time with them. And I think sometimes when you have an organization, the bottom line becomes more important than the people. You'd be surprised the number of times that problems can come up and a person came to the job with skills already that the manager does not even know about. So when things come up at the job, they don't realize that they have a solution right there. Somebody that works for them is skilled in that area, but you may not have been hired for that. We all come to the table with additional skills. Some of that is from the part of the country we came from, the way we were brought up, the things that we've done in the past. These are all additional benefits that an employer gets when you hire somebody. So often HR may know a little bit more about the person, but those questions are generally geared to just the particular job that you're going to do. Rarely do you have any questions that talk to you as an individual. Like, what are you about? What kinds of things have you learned? How do you spend your free time? What are your hobbies like? What do you like to do? Just those kinds of questions. Sometimes you get those over lunch at a job, but often everybody doesn't eat lunch together. Managers don't usually eat with their subordinates. So you have to be very intentional in wanting to know about a person. And I think that should be mandatory when you have someone that works for you, that you have an idea of all of those things. And plus, this also adds into social interest and a belief of someone caring for you. If you take the time to ask those questions, it makes a big difference. We find that same thing in relationships. If a guy was dating a young lady, for instance, and you're asking questions about her, what does she do, this, that, it indicates that you have a genuine concern, and that means a lot to people. So I think it's mandatory that a manager takes the time to intentionally ask questions and just spend time with an individual. And I think that's the best way to really get to know them and understand them better.
So let's talk about discouragement. How can leaders spot someone who's discouraged, and what are the steps to sort of help this employee?
That's a very good question. That's something that comes up even in therapy, because discouragement manifests itself in behaviors that can reflect withdrawal or maladaptive coping measures that they may use. You could look at signs such as like reduced participation or absenteeism, person that's very defensive. These can all be indicators of discouragement. And, regular check-ins will also allow a leader to detect feelings of inadequacies kind of early on. So I say you would really need to emphasize the importance of having a non-judgmental space for discussion, because you have to, you need to talk to people. Some places do have one-to-one check-ins with a regular scheduled time for individual meetings for an employee to just find out, are you having any particular challenges or concerns? And so you want to create a space so early intervention can be done, and of course, as a good manager, you want to monitor performance trends and, whatever the engagement metrics are for your organization. And it could be like participation in meetings. A person comes to a meeting, but they never have anything to say. Are there meeting project timelines? Are you seeing little things that indicate they're being withdrawn? So I think by looking at things like that, it allows you to early on detect discouragement. At Lyrian theory, encouragement is a big thing. And I think of encouragement as basically lending you some of my courage, for you to feel better about what you're doing. But I need to identify these things early so I can make you feel more comfortable that you can do this job and you understand we're on the same team. If a person feels inadequately or strong feelings of inferiority, they can be discouraged. It's not really unusual. So, but when you identify that, basically as a manager, you should lend some of your courage to this individual. Let them know they can do it. Make them feel like they can. Catch things early before you get so deep into a root that it's very, very difficult to pull them out of that bad space that they're in.